This is the maiden voyage because I've been invited to speak a few places, but I haven't accepted any. And the last time I had a really big speaking engagement, it was when I was at Time Magazine, and the people who make Nutella invited me to their factory. So and it was a big day because I got a lot of Nutella. We weren't allowed to accept cash working at Time, but I think I got a year's worth of Nutella or something like that. So anyway, I used to have a really good job. I mean, I still do. It's just different, okay? I mean, it was a good job in that I did a lot of live shots for Fox News. I never had to speak for more than 2 minutes. And there were never more than 2 questions. If there were 2 questions, it was a really important story. I mean, you were probably in a war zone or something like that. Now I find myself up here, and 25 minutes to fill. There are going to be all sorts of tough questions, and probably more than 2. But having been trained, I'm going to answer them by saying, I'm not Father Lombardi, okay? Which is important. I'm not Father Lombardi, by the way, okay? Father Lombardi is the guy on the front lines. He answers the question. This is what happens to me. People call me. People like Nick Pisa, wherever he is, he calls me and says, hey, Greg, is the Vatican make any response? And what do you think on this? I said, Nick, why don't you call Father Lombardi? Well, he's not going to tell me anything. If he's not going to tell you anything, Nick, so I should be telling you something. Yeah, but we used to drink beer together, and stuff like that. Okay. All right, Nick. But I will say that, I mean, because and then I'm not as patient as Father Lombardi either. So I probably just won't say no. I'll say something like, hell no, or something like that. Okay, I mean, it took me all of 2 weeks into the job to realize I had become the perfect Vatican official. As a good friend of mine, Phoebe Nathanson. Everybody sends you their proposal for Pope interviews. And somebody sent me one, and not just to me, but to a number of people, Father Lombardi, the people at Social Communications, all the rest. And it was really well done. 30, 40 pages, not 30, 40 pages, but 10, 15. Here's what we do, and we'd have a global audience in 16 languages and all the rest. And she kept calling me, have you read it, and what are we going to do? Have you read it, what are you going to do? And she was pretty polite, but like the third time, I said, Phoebe, I haven't had time to read it. And I said, she said, what should I do? She said, I don't know, call someone else. Boom. I hung up the phone. I said, what's happened to me? I never did that to anybody. And I apologized to her the next day. And I said, job training, on the job training. Phoebe. So that doesn't happen to me every day. And I try not to yell at people. But anyway, everybody does have a plan for an interview with the Pope, okay? Just so you want to know. If you talk to a journalist, they probably have a plan, and they're working on it. Anyway, things worked out. I actually thought I'd leave Fox to go work, and I like sports a lot. I thought I'd go work for a football club. Another moment of glory, as you'll notice. I mean, they're not very glorious. Nutella, and then I actually knew Carlo Ancelotti pretty well when he was a young coach in Parma. So people were impressed that I knew the coach, who then later, that was like 5 cell phones ago. So I don't know him anymore, but when he went to Chelsea, I sent him a fax. Said, if you want English lessons, I'm available. Figuring, he'd probably give it. Didn't work out that way. Ended up in the Vatican. No free tickets to football matches. But really good seats at Christmas and Easter. Really good seats. I actually was just laughing because I at Fox I had to work every Christmas Eve and every Christmas Day, which gets a little tiresome. And I said, first year I don't have to work on Christmas Eve. And my boss said, well, actually you should go to Mass on Christmas Eve, okay? It's actually, but here we get into the serious matters. I noticed at that Mass and at the Mass on January 6th, not the decline of Pope Benedict. And not that I hadn't noticed it before, but I've noticed it perhaps especially there because in St. Peter's you have the main altar, you've got to get up the steps. And every step was had to be negotiated. And I said, this is not looking good for Rio 6 months down the line. And then I remember on January 6th seeing his brother Georg was at the Mass on the Epiphany in a wheelchair. He's only a couple of years older than Benedict. He's in a wheelchair. And got out of it for the Mass, but then put right back into it. And I sort of put the two things together. And I think it follows with what the Archbishop said in the homily, the Pope's words announcing his resignation. I mean, a physical weakness. And I put the two things together. I put Rio, said I can't make this trip in the state I'm in, and then also his brother saying I can't do the Pope thing 2 years down the line in that condition. So that was, you can imagine my surprise. There were a couple things which, part of my job is fill the space and try to find the good stories. There are some good stories in the Vatican. And a woman who, young journalist, but had some good photographer friends, and she said, listen, I want to do some pieces for the big glossy Italian magazines. Let's find some positive pieces. So we're thinking the museums, but their problem with the rights. They still do sheepskin parchments in the Vatican, so I was trying to get that as a story. These guys, they don't have quills, but pretty close to it, for that kind of thing. I was thinking that. And then I said, there's that monastery where the contemplative nuns are. That would be a good story. No one's ever done a photo story inside there, as far as I know. Let's do that. And this was about September. And I asked my boss, I said, hey, what do you think about that? It'd be good, positive, da-da-da. And he said, no, they're restructuring that right now. The nuns aren't there. Well, I didn't, ding, 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 ding. Didn't think anything of it at the time. And then I had started work in July. I hadn't really taken a vacation, so I said, I put in a proposal. I said I want to go to California in first week of February. I'll be back. Fly back the 10th. I'll be back and work on the 11th. And it went through the first chain. Arrived at the second chain as the Pope's chief of staff, and called the Sostituto. And so I thought it was just going to sail through. And I bought my ticket and everything. And I got a note back saying, why don't you try to come back by the 6th or the 7th? I thought, maybe they're naming the new head of the Vatican Bank, something like that. And I said, it's got to be pretty important, but that seems a little strange. And then I got a phone. The Sostituto had never called me on my cell phone. He always sees me in the hallway, and he says, can you stop in at 1 o'clock? We can stop in at 1:30. So he, to my surprise, on a Sunday night, he called me at home, and he said, can you come in tomorrow morning, early? I said, yes. Ding. And this is strange. And then when I saw him in the hallway, he said, we're going to meet downstairs in my apartment. I thought, I'm being fired. This is great. 6 months and I'm out of here, okay? I mean, I don't know what I did, but I obviously did something. And then it was that morning we went down and with Father Lombardi, the head of the newspaper as well, and he gave us the news. First made us take an oath, even though it was only a couple hours away, and gave us the news. And I just said, wow, here it's begun. I said I thought I was in for a tough year with Benedict declining. Now I was just in for a tough but very exciting. Taking the job, I said, well, I don't know how long I'll last, but if I last a little bit, I'll probably see a conclave. I did not expect to see one so quickly. So anyway, that was that. Safe to say, from a news perspective, we've had an interesting year. Here, I have to make a somewhat embarrassing confession. I was pretty diligent. I covered a lot of different things, mostly Italy for Time. For Fox, I covered all sorts of stuff and traveled mostly. The Vatican was always there. The Vatican's the one story that remains in Rome. And it's well, I don't want to say it's the main reason half the journalists are there, but it's the one thing that which keeps a lot of bureaus open. There's no doubt about that. And I considered myself a pretty diligent reporter, even after I moved into television. And I'd done some homework on Cardinal Bergoglio. I had an Argentinian friend who was very good friends of his. I'd only met him once, I think, the day he was made a cardinal. But he had a good reputation. I did some digging, and I had seen that he had only, at this time, he had been provincial of the Jesuits. He had been Archbishop Cardinal for a while, so I don't know, maybe a span of 10, 15 years that he was on the radar screen in Latin America. And looking at the thing, I saw that, in 12, 15 years, he had only given a half dozen interviews. And so I said, well, he may be a great guy, but I'm certainly going to pray that they don't elect him. For journalists, he's going to be a disaster. A guy who doesn't give interviews is not going to be very good for us. How wrong I was, and how happy I am to say that I was wrong, okay? I mean, in terms of my job and sort of strategy, turning things around, I don't think you could not have planned it better. You could not have planned it better. And I think you saw that 5 minutes after he stepped out onto the balcony, through the language, through the body language. Still hasn't given any interviews, but it didn't matter. I mean, the encounter with journalists, the Archbishop was talking about, I can't remember the words, to tell you the truth. I can only remember the words at the end because I was sort of yelling, say something in Spanish. Because he did, but it was sort of by mistake. It was at the very end. He went ad lib and he said, I'm not going to give you the blessing, I'm going to ask you, and he did, but it's not so much the words I remember, but it was the chemistry with the journalist. And, people brought their families. There's a moment of excitement, but there was something a little more than that, or something a lot more than that. And we were off and running at that point. That was good. I'd love to take credit for the turnaround, but I really can't. I mean, but I knew, and then some things have fallen into place. Sometimes we get it right. I had to laugh. Benedict's helicopter ride, his exit from the scene, was the golden hour. It was like the 1 hour on television where I looked good, because the sun is just right, and coming that way. And it was really well done. When I was getting notes from these networks in New York saying, "Hey, great work," I said, "Yeah, it took us a while to work it out, but." Wow, it was great. But anyway, it's more than that. It's more than the mechanics there. I think it's the person himself. What you see is what you get. What you see is a tremendous amount of sincerity and warmth. We'll get into that later. I don't think charm's the word. It's Christian charity, and that's a whole lot more attractive. Now, the Vatican. I imagine some of you are pretty well aware of how communications are set up in the Holy See, others a little less so. I apologize. I'll try to fly through it pretty quickly, but not totally. The organization, because it is an important part of how we work and how sometimes we don't work, how we can learn to work better. Little point about geography. I'm up on the third floor, what's called the Terza Loggia, in the Secretary of State, which is sort of like, I think you would say, number 10 and Whitehall wrapped all into one. White House and the State Department. Interesting thing up there. I have to take a photo. I'm pretty sure there's a big wall of maps. And then there's even a second wall of maps. It's beautiful. And then the second one, I think it says Falklands and not Malvinas. Okay, I don't know when it dates from, but I'm wondering what if he's seen that. But I'm pretty sure that in Latin, but you can make it out. The idea, basically, I was brought in to sort of help the flow of information from up there down to the press office to Father Lombardi, and he's the one who will answer all your questions afterwards. I'll give you his email and his cell phone, and you'll be all set. He is the one talking with the journalist, the press office is down right outside of St. Peter's Square. I think they did a great job during the whole conclave. We can talk about that later. But he's been the one on the front lines, who is on the front lines day in and day out. I'm trying to stay away from the front lines. Not always possible, because when you have events like conclaves, somebody's got to give English sound bites to the BBC and CNN and the rest. And I tried to do that, even Sky News. I tried to do that from time to time, but only for the bigger stories. What we're trying to do is shape the message, keep people on message. Not always easy in an institution as big, and I would say diverse. A lot of people think it's monolithic. It's not. The people are not. It's a work in progress. It is progressing to a certain degree. I mean, but it's tough. You have to realize where we are. We're not Google, we're not Twitter. It's not a company that started 10 years ago. So you have a communications office, and then you have social media here, and and you have external relations here, and everything's perfect. You have 20 different dicasteries, other offices, sub-offices, and probably 27 different websites somehow connected to the Holy See. You wouldn't know it by looking at them that they were all connected, but they are. And, that kind of thing, coordination of that kind of thing, step by step. Anyway, let me not grab the microphone. I just want to, that's not a very good title, as I say, so let's get rid of that. And I'm not worried about that, except for, I'll talk a little bit about convergence, moving things together, and change with them, or they'll change without you. These are the players in Vatican communications. And I guess this is by age. And also size. Vatican Radio is huge. No, it's not by age, because the observatory is older. Vatican Radio is big. I don't know the number of languages, but it's probably 45 languages that it broadcasts in. 80 years. They've been at it for 80 years. Just had their celebration. The Osservatore Romano is 150 years old. More on them later. That's an interesting print publication. As a friend of mine, a public relations friend, I brought into the office one day, and we were talking about things. And I was explaining exactly what I'm explaining to you, all the different things. And sort of, he's not Catholic, which I thought was even better, so he sort of understand the structure, or the many structures. And I showed him the Osservatore Romano, and he opened it up, the Italian edition. He said, "Oh, that's why they call it a broadsheet, because it is one monstrous newspaper, but very effective." The press office, headed by Father Lombardi, they did a great job during the conclave, opened up an annex. I think they did a great job. There may be some complaints here from some people. Stayed open later than they normally do, which is another problem we have with our press office. One French journalist came for the Paolo Gabriele trial. Left her bag, she thought she was coming for the day, left her bag in the press office, went out to lunch, did some work, did an interview, came back at 4:30, and she couldn't get her bag. She had a flight at 7:30. She said, "What press office closes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on the day of a big story?" And I said, "Welcome to the Vatican, Sophie," okay? And we got her bag, and all ended well. But anyway, some movement there. CTV means Centro Televisivo Vaticano, Vatican Television, which is really a production house. If you watched Benedict's flight to Castel Gandolfo, and if you're old enough to have seen the Dolce Vita, there's a little bit of that film in that there. So Dario Vigano, who took that job, does come from film, and I thought did wonderful, wonderful work on that. Fides is a news agency for Propaganda Fide, and we'll get more on them later when we get to news.va. The internet office is a little more technical. A lot of people, the first Vatican website they see is Vatican.va, and they say, "What's wrong? This looks ancient." It's supposed to look ancient. It looks like a parchment, okay? It's an official thing, and we'll get to the zippier one later. PCCS is the think tank, Pontifical Council for Social Communications. Think tank, although it does have a few practical points, and that's really the convergence right now is all happening there. It's all happening on a website called news.va, which we'll talk about in a bit. Okay, here are just a few words to say. Each of these, what are the difficulties with the convergence? Everybody has their own history, their own autonomy. They like it, they guard it. Nobody wants to give up power or positions. Obviously, everyone has the same mission. This is just the challenge. I mean, I'm not giving the solution here. I'm giving the challenge. We'll give a little bit of the solution. The external perception I find very interesting. This can be really good or really bad. Anybody with any connection to the Vatican for a wire service becomes the Vatican. So if the Osservatore Romano says that James Bond, new film, what's it called, Skyfall is a great film, then it's like the Pope said Skyfall is a great film, okay? The Vatican just signed off on Skyfall. And even the Bond girls and even the Martini, I think there were 5 stories. It was actually a very good layout, okay? But sometimes it can be a little dangerous because you can have people remotely related to the Vatican saying one thing or another, and in a wire service story it becomes the Vatican said this, the Vatican did this, and that, and the Vatican approved this or that, and that can become a little dangerous. This is just a mandate for change. It's not all that. It's important to me because we sort of have it on paper, you know, that which is important in the Vatican. You always have to. I'm learning how the system works. Okay, but essentially, the need for more collaboration, and then also with the radio, the radio is always going to be an important part, a major player, but it's certainly going to change as the technology does. Okay, this is why we came to talk about news.va, which if you don't know it, you should. Because it is the aggregator, the one-stop shop. All these places that I've been talking about come in there, you get them on there. Along with a few other things. We had one little glitch this year, which was when they take a feed from Catholic News Service stories. The guy looking at it every once in a while did this automatic feed, but looking at it every once in a while, his English wasn't perfect. It was a legitimate story, but it looked like the site had been hacked because it was a story about back to movies, Batman films, and the headline was "Holy Switcheroo," and it was something about the moral tone of Batman films having changed. And I got a call from one. She said, "Your site's been hacked. Your site's been hacked." And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." And it certainly, looking at the headline, it did, but it hadn't been. Anyway, I encourage you to take a look at it. It's a great website, not perfect. There are 4 people doing it, and 5 people doing it in 5 languages. So things are a little thin there. And the weaknesses, I think, being the search, the video isn't the most exciting video. But very good for journalists because it does give real-time news in a bunch of different languages. Okay, this is what news.va looks like. You see at the top, Fides, Osservatore, press office, all the thing. The news will come from all those different places. A lot come from the radio just because the radio produces so much. And Pope app from the same office. It's not really a think tank office. If you haven't downloaded the Pope app, 400,000 people have. Sorry, I'm picking on Colin, but I know him, okay, and he deserves it. 400,000 people have, but not Colin Brazier. And this, believe it or not, is I put this up here because I like it and because it shows how you can get positive press sometimes in places where you don't expect it. This is from El País, the Spanish newspaper, which is normally trashing the church every chance it gets. But, sorry, did I say that? Is this being recorded? El País, the Spanish newspaper, which often has a difficult time covering the church objectively. Better? Okay. But anyway, I thought this woman did a I thought this woman did a great job on this. I asked her to send it to me. This was when Pontifex came out with Benedict in December. And the real news tonight, because it could be happening tonight or tomorrow or Sunday, is that the Latin Pontifex account is about to go to 100,000. We were at 98 something when I last looked, so I think by next week it'll break 100,000. That's not the real news. It's interesting though, because I have no idea who those people are. I mean, I really, and I don't think they're just school kids, but I mean, it's an amazing number as far as I'm concerned. I think the news. We'll talk about Pontifex for a second. I think the news on Pontifex is actually that it'll come later this summer, and it's that the Spanish will pass up the English. English is, I think, 2.5 million right now, and the Spanish is about 2.3, but it's growing more quickly, and was under Benedict as well. So, with Pope Francis and with the trip to Latin America this summer, and with the Catholic world being where it is, obviously that's where we're going now. At Pontifex is, I think, a interesting example of things can move in the Vatican. They do move slowly, but if you think that Benedict signed on to it, tentatively it seemed, as he hit it. Some people said he didn't actually send the first tweet. He did. Someone just checked to make sure it went. But that he signed on to it, and that Pope Francesco afterwards agreed as well to go on with it, I think is a good sign. There's a fair amount of skepticism and even opposition at the start, and hats off for them that they went through. And even afterwards, there's been some, because obviously, you throw out an invitation and negative comments, and when your audience is 18 to 24, you're going to get some. But it's really a wonderful, wonderful way to reach people with pretty limited effort and expense, and a great multiplier effect. I was just looking yesterday at the 10 most tweets. The Pope's only tweeted like 42 times. The 10 most retweeted and the 5 least retweeted is very interesting. The most retweeted, of course, when he was just elected. But then after that, around the time of Easter, no matter how far you've drifted away, God, the loving Father, is always there waiting for you with open arms. That kind of thing really strikes a chord with people. One little thing on the continuity. Speaking of Benedict and Pope Francis, I saw an interesting wire service story when the Pope spoke about women. Easter, shortly after Easter, one of the Gospels said the wire service wrote a story, totally new style, whatever. And somebody else said, actually, if you look at Jesus of Nazareth, it looks like Francis may have stolen this from Benedict, okay? So I wouldn't want to say that, okay, because you don't want to accuse the Pope of plagiarism, but I found that interesting in terms of the continuity. I also found interesting there are a load of articles, certainly in Italy, about all this difficulty we were going to have having 2 popes, okay, and even recently in an Italian article, but I'll believe it when Pope Benedict comes out at the Angelus and says, "I'm sorry, Francis is sick today, and I'm going to have to fill in." Okay, but until then, I'm not buying it. All right, a little more. Compliments to Soledad. Do you guys like this picture? I like it. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I was involved with it and we got something positive from El País, okay? But I like it a lot. And I want to get a big copy of it for one of the guys who did all the work on this. Just a few things on Pope Francis, who I, of course, thought was not a good communicator when I was studying his possible candidacy back in 2005. My former boss at Fox, Roger Ailes, wrote a book once, You Are the Message, which has a lot of nuts and bolts in it, but, with one key point, and that is if you believe in something, you're probably going to be able to communicate it pretty well. Which makes me think for many of you dealing in church communications, that leads to a deeper question, which is maybe when we fail to communicate, it also signals a lack of faith or a failure to live the faith well. But I'll leave that for another conference that Alexander can organize somewhere and invite Paul Tye, someone like that, who knows how to talk about these things. I mention this because, whatever challenges we have on a structural level, we certainly got a huge boost with the election of Pope Francis. To the point where it's a little scary, you say, hey, wait a minute, because how long is it going to last? I don't know the answer to that question. Let's see. But You Are the Message. It's real. What you're getting is real. I was talking to a friend one day, not long ago, a month ago. He said, "So what are you doing? What are your plans? Whatever." And I said, I just sort of talked about problem issues, and I said, well, I think we have to do more in the area, things I'd like to work on, transparency and one thing or another, the economics, the business stuff, the numbers, getting them out there, and publishing more things. And he said, yeah, but that's all defense work, So that's not proactive, positive communications. What are you going to do on a positive side? He said, I'm going to kick the ball to the Pope. What do you think? I mean, the Pope scores goals. The Pope scores goals for us, and he continues to do it. I don't know if you get to see the homilies on each morning, picked up by Vatican radio. But people are just eating this stuff up. It's sincere, it's genuine, it's challenging, challenging for all of us. The faith is real, the humility is real, and that comes through. The homily we heard about several of these images, washing the feet of the youth in the prison on Holy Thursday. One of the things which, when I first saw it, I didn't get at all. I said, the Pope paying his bill at the pensione where he had stayed before the conclave. I said, he owns the building now. Okay, I mean it's his. But it really sent a very, very positive sign about we are here to serve. We're not here to look. We're not here to look for privileges. I like that thumbs up. And here, the American kid. If this wasn't providential, I think this has done more to bring people back closer to the church than anything I've seen so far. I may be wrong about that, because maybe it's that simple phrase saying, no matter how far you've drifted, God is always waiting there for you with the open arms. Maybe it's that, and I'm not sure you can judge that. But I think this really says it all. Sort of the mission to the margins. Francis' mission to the margins, and I'm sure on Wednesday mornings you have better things to do than turn on Telepace or Catholic television, so you don't see it. But I try to watch every audience out of the corner of my eye, the Wednesday audience. And the end of the audience is greeting every single disabled, sick person, one by one. And it takes a long time. And it is great. It is great because of every scene is a bit like this one. I think what we're seeing in the end is this. These scenes, the morning homilies, a faith put in practice. The politicians in America talked about change you can believe in. Well, this to me is sort of like faith you can believe in. You should always be able to believe in that, but it seems to me like that is what's coming through. Just to wrap up, I would not call Pope Francis a great communicator. And I know you're saying, what? He is a great communicator. But I consider that slightly pejorative in some sense, like it's a trick or something, and it's not. I'd call him a great Christian. I think there's really a very keen sense of Christian charity. First and foremost, for anyone who's suffering, and you only need to see him in action for a short while, and you get that message. That's it. Thank you very much. You're allowed to have 2 questions and 2 drinks and whatever else. I don't know. Thanks.